It was a golden afternoon at SeaWorld San Diego. Trainers moved like clockwork with their marine partners. The crowd roared with delight as a towering orca exploded from the depths, water splashing like shattered glass. At the center of it all stood Ken Peters, a seasoned trainer with more than a decade in the water, calm and assured at the pool's edge. He had lived this moment countless times, but something about today felt off. Without the faintest warning, a 5,000-pound orca named Kasatka latched onto his foot and plunged him beneath the surface. The arena fell into eerie stillness. Then came the gasps. For nearly 10 excruciating minutes, Ken Peters was a hostage beneath the waves, yanked down over and over, struggling to remain composed even as he was dragged deeper into an unseen void. The shouts of the audience, the fight for breath, the terrifying realization that this apex predator no longer obeyed. What unfolded defied belief and would haunt marine parks forever. This is a true tale of survival in the depths. Welcome to Wild Shock Files. If you care about truth, animals, and the line where spectacle meets survival, make sure to subscribe, like, and stay until the end. Ken Peters wasn't just another trainer. By 2006, he'd spent nearly 20 years immersed in the world of killer whales, mastering the delicate balance of trust, timing, and dominance. Calm, methodical, deeply respected. Peters was the type of handler you'd want when facing a creature of immense power. He didn't take risks. He didn't chase applause. He earned trust. Through years of tireless, behind-the-scenes bonding, feeding, studying, learning each signal and mood swing, he built a rapport few could replicate. His strongest connection was with Kasatka, a whale he'd worked with intimately. Captured from the wild near Iceland in 1978, she had spent nearly 30 years behind walls. Brilliant, powerful, fiercely maternal, Kasatka was the queen of her realm. To spectators, she was a marvel. But to Peters, she was a partner. They swam side by side, face to face, in rehearsed moments of affection. No signs of threat, no hint of danger. But something beneath that polished bond was shifting, subtle, silent, unseen. And on November 29, 2006, inside a packed Shamu stadium, everything would fall apart. Kasatka wasn't an ordinary orca. Towering over 17 feet long and tipping the scale at 5,000 pounds, she ruled SeaWorld's pool like a ghost in deep water. Born in Iceland's wild currents in 1976 and stolen from her ocean home at age 2, she had spent a lifetime confined. A star performer, yes, but behind closed doors, a challenge. Trainers knew her mind was razor sharp and her will dominant. She wasn't chosen for ease. She was paired only with the best. Her dominance extended beyond humans to the other whales. When Kasatka entered, others submitted. But hidden in SeaWorld's own logs and whispered in staff testimonies, a darker image emerged. According to documents later made public by OSHA, Kasatka had shown erratic, defiant behaviors for years. In 1993, she lunged at a female trainer, knocking her into the pool. She sometimes refused cues. She could become territorial. One incident report noted increased agitation when separated from her calf, warning staff to exercise extreme caution under stress. Trainers testified she constantly tested limits. One even said she obeyed, but only when she chose to. Yet, she was a star, flawless on stage, and for Ken Peters, trusted and respected by her. The danger felt manageable, until it wasn't. On that afternoon in November, with her calf watching in a stadium packed with families, no one foresaw that this would be the moment she would turn. Wednesday, November 29th, 2006. The San Diego sky was bright, the air brisk, and every seat in Shamu Stadium was filled with eager faces. Children clutched snacks, parents steadied cameras, music pulsed through speakers. Believe was about to begin. Ken Peters stood poised beside the main pool, microphone in hand, wetsuit clinging tight. He had done this countless times. In front of him, Kasatka hovered just below the surface, still and silent. This was a dance built on trust, a stunning illusion of harmony. The music swelled. Applause erupted. Peters dove into the pool and glided alongside the massive whale. They moved together like mirrors. On cue, Kasatka rose, lifting Ken smoothly onto her back, then dove gracefully beneath him. To the crowd, it was spellbinding. To Peter's, routine. But beneath the surface, something shifted. A tiny flick of her fin. A pause. From the neighboring pool, her calf Kalia called out. Shrill, repetitive. Something had stirred a maternal instinct. Then, as Peters floated beside her, ready for the next behavior, Kasatka began to sink. At first, slow, purposeful. Peters followed. But before he could react, before he could give a signal or break away, she struck. With terrifying precision, Kasatka clamped her jaws around his left foot and yanked him under. Screams cut through the stadium. The music died. Underwater, silence and bubbles. Her jaws tightened. The pool exploded in froth as she dove, Peters trapped in her grip. The pressure was crushing. Deep wounds tore through his foot, not enough to break bone, but enough to send a message. She was in command. Everything vanished in cold darkness. Ken spiraled through the void. Fighting back could provoke worse, so he did the only thing left. He stayed calm. Kasatka burst upward after nearly a minute, just enough for Peters to suck in precious air. Some in the crowd clapped nervously, unsure if this was still theater. But the moment vanished. She dove again, faster this time. Ken's body thrashed behind her, limp against her force. On deck, backup trainers rushed in. Horror painted their faces. This wasn't a missed cue. This was rejection. Total loss of control. They grabbed nets, poles, high-pressure hoses, slapping the surface, shouting, anything to divert her. Nothing worked. Kasatka resurfaced, just long enough for Ken to lift one trembling hand. He was alive. Barely. Then she dove again. SeaWorld's internal dive logs would later show. She held him down for nearly a minute, over and over. Each plunge robbed him of air. Each ascent gave seconds to live. Panic swept through the crowd. Children wept. Gasps echoed off the walls. Someone screamed. Trainers barked into radios, triggering the emergency system. But no one could dive in. Rules forbade it. Ken was alone. Kasatka circled again, foot still locked in her jaws, dragging him like a prize. His lungs burned, his world spun. Every second was survival. But she wasn't finished. From the bleachers, the dream turned to nightmare. What began as a graceful ballet became an unthinkable horror. At first, the audience couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. But as Ken remained submerged, as trainers' faces twisted with fear, the truth became unbearable. Parents stood in shock, shielding their children's eyes. A woman later told investigators, "We thought he was playing, but then he didn't come up, and we saw his face." Another described chaos, slapping water, sharp whistles, people frozen in disbelief. Beneath the surface, Ken Peters was living breath to breath. Kasatka gave him just enough air, only to seize and drag him again. Yet even then, he didn't thrash or scream. He sent signals, silent hand motions, telling the surface he was still present, still fighting. Trainers above fixated on those hands. It was their only window. They waved towels, tossed life rings, called her name. But Kasatka was locked in a trance. She dove and circled, with the man she once trusted. In the stands, realization hit hard. This was no accident. This was an assault. "I kept wondering," one spectator told the press, "how long can he last?" Time warped. It felt eternal. Still, Peters endured, still composed. One wrong move could end him. He knew. Panic meant death. And Kasatka wasn't done. 9 minutes and 47 seconds. That's how long Kasatka refused to let go. Nearly 10 soul-crushing minutes of dragging, plunging, holding. 10 eternal minutes where breath became a luxury, and the surface a distant dream. Peters had been yanked into darkness, spun through a world of pressure and silence, his body pulled like prey by a creature once considered a partner. Over and over, she dragged him under, each time holding him longer, deeper. Each forced descent chipped away at his strength. His body screamed for oxygen. His mind clung to fading discipline. And then, it changed. Kasatka surfaced one final time, but this time, she didn't dive. She didn't pull. She simply floated, still, immense, unmoving. Her black and white form lingered like a shadow beneath glass, just feet from the viewing window, where wide-eyed spectators stood frozen. Ken Peters bobbed beside her, his body limp, his breath ragged, his limbs barely responsive. He didn't fight. He didn't dare. For the first time since the nightmare began, she let go. Her jaws opened, the grip that had nearly ended him, gone. But he didn't move. He couldn't tell if it was over or just a pause in the storm. Every instinct screamed to stay still. One wrong twitch, one sudden motion, and she could strike again. Seconds passed like hours. His body trembled beneath the surface. Was this mercy or something else? Then, hesitantly, painfully, he began to swim. Each movement was sluggish, deliberate. His foot, torn and throbbing, left a trail of blood behind him, curling through the chlorinated water in ghostly spirals. The pain was incandescent, flaring with every kick, but he gritted his teeth and pressed forward. Not fast, not smooth, just forward. The platform was only feet away, but in that moment, it may as well have been a mile. On deck, trainers dropped to their knees, arms reaching out, voices raised in urgent encouragement. "Ken, come on!" One held a long pole, aimed at Kasatka's massive head, ready to intervene at the first sign of aggression. But she didn't lunge. She didn't move. She watched, silent, her dark eyes locked on him, not with rage now, but something stranger, something colder. Ken dragged himself forward. His hands searched for the edge. Slippery concrete, rough ledge. He clawed at it, grabbed, slipped, tried again. Two trainers lunged. Their hands seized his arms, yanking him from the water in a single, desperate pull. He collapsed onto the platform. His foot was a mess of shredded flesh, raw and pulsing with blood. Gaping wounds revealed muscle and tendon. His wetsuit was ripped, stained dark crimson. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. His face was ashen, his lips blue, but his eyes were open, still here, still alive. Emergency medics stormed in, voices clipped and urgent. They applied pressure, oxygen, wrapped the foot as fast as they could. But everyone watching knew the physical damage, though gruesome, wasn't the worst of it. Peters had just returned from the jaws of something primal, something relentless, and it had looked him in the eye and chosen to let him go. He had survived a predator whose instincts had overpowered years of training. But what lingered now, what clung to every shaken breath and haunted blink, was something deeper, something broken. The crowd stood in silence. SeaWorld staff, trainers, guests. No one moved, no one spoke, because in that moment, the illusion shattered. What the world didn't yet understand, what SeaWorld would soon be forced to confront, was that this wasn't just a near miss. It wasn't just a freak event. It was a warning, and it would not be the last. The footage of Ken Peters' attack didn't fade into obscurity. It became evidence. In February 2010, just weeks after senior trainer Don Brancho was killed at SeaWorld Orlando, OSHA launched a full-scale probe into SeaWorld entertainment. What they uncovered wasn't isolated tragedy. It was systemic neglect. During the hearings, attorneys revealed a video few had ever seen. Kasatka's 2006 attack on Peters, filmed during a holiday show. The footage, nearly 10 minutes, was played frame by frame in a Washington, D.C. courtroom. They watched in silence as Kasatka dragged him down, again and again. OSHA labeled it as classic aggression. SeaWorld had never made the video public. Now it was federal evidence. The case was damning. This wasn't random. It was preventable. OSHA argued that waterwork with orcas presented an obvious hazard, death or severe injury. Files revealed internal warnings. Kasatka had a known pattern, especially when separated from her calf. SeaWorld knew. In court sketches, SeaWorld executives sat stiff, arms folded. The brand's billion-dollar weight pressing down. Headlines blazed. SeaWorld accused of ignoring dangers. OSHA says risks were well documented. On April 6, 2011, Judge Ken S. Welsh delivered a blistering ruling. SeaWorld was guilty of willfully violating safety laws, fined $75,000. On appeal, it held. From then on, no more waterwork with orcas without barriers. The impact? Seismic. Behind closed doors, the industry reeled. The age of theatrical orca shows was ending. But for the trainers, those who once swam with giants, the reckoning was just beginning. And what came next would cut even deeper. Why did Kasatka attack Ken Peters? The question echoed through marine parks, trainer lounges, and courtrooms. She wasn't new to him. There was history, trust, a bond forged over years. But in minutes, it unraveled into terror. Kasatka birthed 4 calves in captivity. Her youngest, Nakai, born in 2001, was just 5, a constant companion. Many pointed to this maternal tie. Nakai had been nearby during the show, the crowd's roar, the trainer's presence, the music. It could have overwhelmed her instincts. John Jett, former SeaWorld trainer turned critic, told reporters, "Mother orcas in captivity are hypersensitive. Stress twists their instincts. It's not natural." That word, stress, surfaced again and again. In court, in interviews, in documentaries. Kasatka had shown warning signs, aggression, withdrawal, teeth worn from chewing gates. Like locking a person in a tub for 25 years, one expert said. Eventually something breaks. SeaWorld ultimately ended orca waterwork in the US, citing evolving standards. But for those who lived that November day, it was too late. And beneath it all, one haunting question remained. What happens when a predator has nowhere else to go? Ken Peters never entered the water with an orca again, though he survived those horrifying minutes with Kasatka. Despite repeated plunges and crushing bites, something fundamental was lost. He returned to SeaWorld, but never to the pool. The footage, grainy, haunting, remains, played in courts, shared by activists, studied by future trainers. A man, helpless, pulled under by a whale he once trusted. The years that followed unraveled the entire industry. Public backlash erupted. In 2013, the documentary Blackfish thrust the issue into the spotlight, making Peters' ordeal a flashpoint. Former trainers broke their silence. About trauma, about truth. SeaWorld finally relented. In 2016, they ended their breeding program and promised the phase-out of shows. But for many, it came years too late. Ken Peters' story became more than a headline. It became a mirror, reflecting a shattered bond between man and beast. He entered the water with trust. He surfaced, scarred. And the world would never forget. Thanks for watching Wild Shock Files. Subscribe for more stories that reveal the untamed truth behind the animals we think we understand.